We're just waiting for people to come in. How was the cut? How did you find the cut? For those who did it. Oh, very good. Very good. I was thinking that you'll find it too easy. Yeah, because being very easy. Oh, being very easy. You cannot have a lot of time for that. But it's just enough. Actually, it was even extended. I don't know if you started at 10:50. Just a little more than an hour. It was requiring. Okay. Okay. Yeah, but even then, even of course the typing and all that, uh, I was calculating. Even if you just answer with three minutes each question, you actually finish in just a little over half an hour. So you have extra time counting on whatever else you needed has been allotted. I mean, has been considered. But anyway, I don't know whether you should have 2 hours for that kind of cut. It's very straightforward. The answers are just focused on something very specific. I don't know, they could have been more if you had to enumerate so many things you have to remember or discuss. But it's something focused on a specific thing already. Your thinking is drawn into something clear, I mean concrete. Anyway, I hope that you have answered somehow most of the questions. Yeah, someone told me that she found the time little, but the questions actually were requiring very short answer. I mean, very short answers. 2 to 3 sentences. You should have been able to answer the things. But probably it's to learn how to go direct to the point when giving answers, directly answering the questions. Okay. All right. So don't worry. I'll be very considerate as I have always been, in considering in marking. I mean, I'll not give you unnecessary extra marks, but I always take into account. I try to understand what you have written. Okay. So last week we talked about we have 2 groups that will report today. I hope that we can finish. And then next week we have King's report in um, OECD. So I hope we can also finish so that we can move on to the other topics. You can just uh, give us the highlights, key points. Okay, the group on the Sarbanes and Oxley report has interesting discussion, interesting presentation. Okay, not to worry, James, yours is also good. Okay, but yeah, some things are more interesting than others. Okay, so we talked about Cadbury report last week. What do you remember from that? Okay, actually, the Cadbury report had, okay, we didn't discuss it so much, but the companies that were problematic at around that time were Colorol and Polypec Consortium. Okay, can somebody remember what brought up, what were the concerns why the Cadbury committee was convened or was formed? What were the main issues of Cadbury report? The main concern. What were they addressing? Julie?
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, so a summary maybe of why it was formed. So initially, the corporations which were existing, they used to have so many problems with scams and failures, and failures which led to some losses in the company. And the sponsors were concerned at how the perceived low level of confidence was in the financial reporting and the
Mhm.
ability of the auditors to provide and safeguard the users of the company's report. So basically, the auditing and the financial reporting was actually the problem. So they needed a better way to do the financial reporting and the auditing.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. So they wanted to raise the standard of corporate governance in, through this financial reporting to have them objective and reliable. No? And also, yeah, the directors to also be very objective and to be able to guarantee the the financial reports as such to be truly reliable. Okay. And then also, suddenly there were companies that collapsed after very recent, okay, has been sort of consistently performing well, and even very recent reports of sound financial statements reporting profit, and suddenly they just collapse. Okay, so they were trying to avoid all that. Thank you, Julie. That was good. Um, there were examples of these. No, this Colorol and Polypec. Colorol was an industrial company in Britain that was one of the 100 biggest, with so many thousands of employees, 8,500, and they reported so many very high increase in profits, something of, hundreds of millions. Even the chairman's salary was tripled. Okay. John Ashcroft, even he was awarded the, what do you call it, commander of the British Empire. No? And then suddenly, in a matter of months, the company was in huge debts, and it collapsed. Okay. So there was also this Walepek with a gentleman called Nadir. Nadir, I forget the name. I think it was that company. Yes, it was. Yeah. Um, yeah, Nadir, Asil Nadir. And I don't know, had also so many, they were doing so well. What was it? A textile company in the 1980s, Polypic International, and they were listed in the London Stock Exchange with the highest market capitalization. But suddenly in 1991, they had debts of 1.3 billion pounds. So this CEO had to run away to Cyprus, and he was accused of having stolen something to the effect of 35 million pounds. But anyway, he ran away for some years. After 17 years, he came back to London to face charges, and eventually he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. That was in 2012. So at this time, he's still serving his sentence. So these companies were doing well, and even when the Cadbury report was happening, there was also the scandal of Bank of Credit and Commerce International and Maxwell Group of companies. This Bank of Credit and Commerce, they were doing so well. They have 400 branches in 78 countries. But then again, suddenly they reported losses, and it was found out that this bank was established as a vehicle for money laundering, or even they were being used by terrorists, by drug lords, and all kinds of, I don't know, some thugs. I don't know whether I can call them that. But anyway, yeah, the, the Maxwell Group of companies. Um, Sorry, I'm not sharing any screen, but just a little bit of a preview of the background of that Cadbury Cadbury report. There was this Robert Maxwell who was actually a minister at some point, but what happened to him? Even he was found in the, I don't know which ocean it was. Yeah, Atlantic Ocean. He drowned there. They were claiming that probably he fell from his yacht. We don't know. But after that, it was found out that the he did some funds of 440 million were misappropriated from the company, from his pension funds, of the Maxwell Group. And later on, shortly after that, they filed for bankruptcy. So with all this, okay, the Cadbury report was okay. The Cadbury committee was formed, and as we were told, it was to raise standard and increase reliability of. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, basically. So the content of the report, you remember the contents of the report that was discussed exhaustively. Now I was thinking that um, with all that, okay, you have a very good picture of how good governance, with all the things we are going to learn with the code, the regulations and code. I think you will become experts of how corporate governance is supposed to be. Yeah. When you become CEOs, CFOs, no, you will not be CFOs. Maybe you'll be COOs, Chief Operations Officer, with your technical expertise. You could be in a highly digitalized company. I mean, big companies, you may take these positions. And I will not be surprised if some of you become CEOs because you are very good. So I mean, you will understand. You understand by all. I mean, after all this, you will have known what good governance entails. Obviously, between theory and practice, it's always a challenge. But if you have this good background, you know what to be looking into when it comes to understanding when it comes to implementing in your business operations. Okay. Okay. Now, yeah, very good. What was I saying? The contents. What are the contents of Cadbury report? In summary, according to the subheadings or topics, they set out clearly the director's responsibilities, role of auditors, rights and responsibilities of shareholders, and they indicated good rather code of best practice. In fact, the Cadbury report was known as code of best practice. Okay. So now with that review or introduction, we can um, give the floor to James Group, Jem Cabeches, so that they can tell us about UK Combined Code. James, are you ready? Wow, that was so fast. How did you become I've not even shared make you a co-host and you're already a co-host. How did that happen?
I don't know.
It became automatic. Okay.
I should start, yeah? So, I'll be talking about the UK Corporate Code, also known as the Combined Code. This is my group.
Now
Am I,
could you introduce yourself before you speak, or if you could show your video for a second so that your face can be seen, as
oh,
you
no,
wish.
no. It's
As you
fine. I'll
wish.
just introduce myself. I'm James Boro. Yeah, and as I said, we'll be talking about the UK Corporate Code, UK Corporate Governance Code, and these are my group members. So, this is what we'll be covering. Um, so I'll just start by describing what the UK Corporate Code is. So the UK Corporate Governance Code, formerly known as the Combined Code, sets out the principles the board of directors should apply in order to promote the purpose, values, and the future success of the company.
Sorry,
So,
sorry, James.
uh,
James, hang on a bit. I was just looking for Moses here. I don't know if I made him co-host. If he could assist in letting people in. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, James. Please go ahead.
okay. So the code sets out expected standards of good practice in relation to issues such as board leadership, company purpose, division of responsibilities, composition, succession and evaluation, audit risk and internal control, and remuneration. Those are the main key points that will be talked about throughout the presentation. So, over the years, the code has been revised and expanded to take into account the increasing demands of the UK corporate governance framework. The latest one being, I think it was made in the, I think June 18th, 2018, and has since applied to companies that were formed from January 2019 onwards up to today. I think that's the latest version. The principle of collective responsibility within a unitary board has been a success, and alongside the stewardship activities of investors, played a vital role in delivering high standards of governance, encouraging long-term investment. Nevertheless, the debate about the nature and extent of the framework has intensified as a result of financial crisis and high-profile examples of inadequate governance and misconduct, which have led to poor outcomes for a wide range of stakeholders. I think the Cadbury issue comes into play here. Uh, Misconduct that played a part. The misconduct of the directors played a part in the downfall of the company. Um, the 2018 code focuses on the application of the principles. The listing rules require companies to make a statement of how they applied the principles in a manner that would enable shareholders to evaluate how the principles have been applied. The ability of investors to evaluate the approach to governance is important. Reporting cover the application of the principles in the context of the particular circumstances of the company and how the board has set the company's purpose and strategy and how it's met objectives and achieved outcomes through the decisions it has taken. So I think what they're talking about here is uh, the principles should be clear and should the investor should know about it. So it's clear so that the shareholders know the purpose of and the direction the company is heading towards. And this code acts as a guideline towards all this. Though unlisted companies may elect to follow the UK Corporate Governance Code, the listing rules require premium listed companies to apply the principles and comply with the provisions and to report to shareholders on this. So they can actually apply these principles, all of them word for word, or they can try and, if it's necessary, they can try and come up with an alternative framework that is close to said principles. The current version of the code was published by the Financial Reporting Council, the FRC, in July 2018 and is effective for periods commencing on or after 1st January 2019. All the principles of the code should be applied by the company, and the manner in which the company has applied them should be explained in the annual report. Directors should take care to apply the code's principles to reflect the unique conditions in the company that require a tailored response and should explain how they have done this. So the Financial Reporting Council's guidance and board effectiveness encourages the chair to report personally in the company's annual report about board leadership and effectiveness. The code's provisions should be allowed on a comply or explain basis where a company may find that an alternative approach may be more beneficial towards good governance than following the provision in the code. So this is what I was talking about. If they think that there's there's an alternative towards the given principles based on because different companies have different, how can I say, like, philosophies. So if they think they should follow a slightly different framework, they can change it, but as long as it stays within the bounds of the nature of these principles, as we'll see later in the presentation. In that case, the company ought to explain the situation clearly in the annual report. So I think the next person presents.
I'm going to take you through the next part. We're going to discuss leadership and company purpose.
Sorry.
My name is
Okay.
Nathan.
Okay.
Okay, we are going to discuss about board leadership and company purpose. Under the board leadership, a successful company is led by an effective and entrepreneurial board whose role is to promote the long-term sustainable success of the company, generating value for shareholders and contributing back to the society. The board should establish the company's purpose, values, and strategy, and satisfy itself that these and its culture are aligned. All directors must act with integrity, lead by example, and promote the desired culture. The board the board members are supposed to set an example for the company to, and also so that the company reputation may be good. The next slide. The board should ensure that the necessary resources are in place for the company to meet its objectives and measure performance against them. The board should also establish a framework of prudent and effective controls which enables risk to be assessed and be managed also. In order for the company to meet its responsibilities to shareholders and stakeholders, the board should ensure effective engagement with and encourage participation from these parties, the rest of the shareholders and the stakeholders. The board should ensure that workforce policies and practices are consistent to the company's values and support its long-term. The workforce should be able to raise any matters of any concern whenever they arise in an organization. Main principles contained provisions. Under provisions, the board should assess the basis on which the company generates and preserves value over the long term. The board should also assess and monitor the culture of the organization where it is not satisfied that policy, practices, or behavior through the business are aligned to the company's purpose, values, and strategy. It should seek assurance that management has taken the corrective action. In addition to formal general meetings, the chair should seek regular engagement with major shareholders in order to understand their views on governance and performance against the strategy. Next slide.
How, Nathan, how can they
Yes.
monitor culture? Culture.
The culture of the organization.
Yeah. It says
when-
there on the previous one, monitor culture. How can that be done?
That can be monitored by when in an organization once you're there are rules that govern the organizations and the culture is among the rules. So when one seems to be not going, maybe like what culture rules? I'm trying to come up with an example, but
It's okay.
it's
What about it's okay. The other people in the class, what can you say about that? Can you comment? Maybe I should not interrupt, but just so that you don't fall asleep in listening.
okay. Let's continue. The board should assess.
Nobody has answered me. Why are you continuing?
Okay, let's wait for an answer.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, you can be thinking there's an attempt here from Julie. Yeah, but it somehow leading to the answer. But yeah. Sorry, okay, you may continue. The others can think. Okay. Here
slide.
there was on the slide it says part of the duty, no, of the role of the we're talking about the director's responsibilities of board, something to do with the role of the board, isn't it, Nathan? What are we talking about? The organization's goals and board directorship or something.
On which point? Pardon?
Now, what are you discussing? The main idea of your discussion, the general subheading.
The board leadership
It's
and
about the
company
board.
purpose.
Okay. Yeah. So, and one of the things here, the board should assess and monitor culture. How can they do that?
Okay, I'm trying to come up with the
It's
points.
okay. Don't worry. Your team can also help and the others in the class just to discuss. You may proceed. Then we shall see how to.
Next, the next slide. Okay, sorry for the interruption. Let's continue. When 20% or more of votes have been cast against the board recommendation for resolution, the company should explain when announcing voting results, what actions it intends to take to consult shareholders in order to understand the reasons behind the results. The board should understand the views of the company's other key stakeholders and describe in the annual report how their interests and the matters set out in the section 172 of the Companies Act 2006 have been considered in board discussions and decision making. There should be a means for the workforce to raise concerns in confidence and, if they wish, anonymously. Yes, the board should take action to identify and manage conflicts of interest, including those resulting from significant shareholdings, and ensure that the influence of that parties does not compromise or override independent judgment. I think I'm going to pass over to division of responsibilities. The next slide.
Okay, so for the division of responsibilities, the responsibilities is basically the obligation of the board of the directors.
Please don't forget to say your names.
Okay. I'm David Ogaro. Should I continue?
Yes.
Yeah, so for the responsibilities, this is basically the obligation of the board of directors and the executive who lead the company. So the chair, who is the chairperson, usually leads the board and is responsible for the overall effectiveness in directing the company. And the chair should always be open and should always deliver clear information. So this comes back to transparency in governing the company, where the chair should always give accurate information and not misleading information to the board of directors and the shareholders. So the board should also have an equal distribution of both the executive and the non-executive directors. So this is usually to ensure that no group dominates in decision making during the decision making. And also, next slide. Yeah, then there's the non-executive directors should always be given enough time to meet their responsibilities and should in turn provide constructive challenges, strategic guidance, and offer specialist advice and hold management to account. So when during decision making, the non-executive directors should be given enough time to make to do their obligations, and yeah, then the board has its duties which needs to do, and therefore it should ensure that it has the policies, the processes, information, time, and resources it needs in order to function effectively and efficiently. Yeah, I think this is it for the principles. Next slide, I think it's provisions. Yeah, so for the provisions, okay, Khalid.
My name is Khalid. I'll be taking you through the provisions. So the first provision is the chair should be independent on appointment when assessed against some circumstances.
We cannot hear you well.
Hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. So the chair, sorry.
That's
So the
Khalid,
chair should,
you said? Khalid?
Khalid.
Okay.
So I said the first provision is that the chair should be independent on appointment when assessed against some circumstances. So the roles of the chair and the chief executive should not be exercised by the same individual. A chief executive should not become chair of the same company Even if this is example, if it is proposed by the board, major shareholders should be consulted ahead of that appointment. The second provision is that the board should identify the annual report each non-executive director it considers to be independent. So circumstances which are likely to impair or could appear to impair an executive director. Some of them include like if he has been an employee of the company or a group within the last 5 years, or he has or has had within the last 3 years a material relationship with the company, like if he was maybe a partner, shareholder, or a director. So another provision is that at least half the board, excluding the chair, should be non-executive directors whom the board considers to be independent. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so another provision is the board should appoint one of the independent non-executive directors to be the senior independent director, provide a sounding board for the chair, and serve as an intermediary for the other directors and shareholders. So this is led by the senior independent director. The non-executive directors should meet without the chair present at times, and at least annually, to appraise the chair's performance, and on other occasions, if it's necessary, to evaluate his performance. So another provision is that non-executive directors have a prime role in appointing and removing executive directors. So these non-executive directors should scrutinize and hold account the performance of management and individual executive directors against their performance objectives. So also the responsibilities of the chair, the chief executive, and the board and committees should be clear. It should be set out in writing, agreed by the board, and should be made publicly available. The annual report also should set out the number of meetings of the board and its committee and the individual attendance by directors. And finally, when making new appointments, the board should take into account other demands on directors' time. So prior to the appointment, significant commitments should be disclosed with an indication of the time that they'll be involved in with those commitments. And additional appointments should not be undertaken without prior approval of the board. So that's mainly the provisions when it comes to division of responsibilities. You can go to the next slide.
I'm Joshua Momani. I'll be taking you through the composition, succession, and evaluation. In this section, we'll talk about how the code is trying to get an effective board that can govern the company in a way the shareholders are happy and can also have a sensitivity to ethical issues as well. I'll be taking you through the principles. We'll start with the first point, which talks about appointments to the board. Appointments to the board should be subject to a formal, vigorous, and transparent procedure, and an effective succession plan should be maintained for the board and senior management. Over here, under the UK law, we see how directors are chosen by the directors themselves, or more precisely, a nomination committee, which is comprised of non-executive directors who choose the next directors. The second part of the point, both appointments and succession plans should be based on merit and objective criteria, and within the context should promote diversity of gender, social and ethnical background, cognitive and personal strengths. Over here, we see that since ethics prevents governance nowadays, it shows how the code is encouraging diversity. We'll go to the second point, which is the board and its committee should have a combination of skills, experience, and knowledge. Consideration should be given to length of service of the board as a whole and membership regularly refreshed. Over here, we see that the board should have a combination of skills, experience, and knowledge, which is going to allow the governing of the company to be successful. And lastly, for the third point, annual evaluation of the board should consider its composition, diversity, and how effectively members work together to achieve objectives. Individual individual evaluations should demonstrate whether each director continues to contribute effectively. For this point, we talk about annual evaluation. The code says that each year the board itself should evaluate how well it is doing. Since evaluating yourself doesn't seem to be really effective, the code adds on that the FTSE 350 companies in the UK, there should be an external evaluation at least every 3 years. The point of this is wanting the shareholders to gain confidence that the board is thinking about how effectively it is discharging its duties. Next, we'll go to provisions. Papa will take over.
Good afternoon. I'm Liz Papa, and I'll be taking you through the provisions. For this section 3 of the UK Corporate Code and Governance, which mainly deals with composition, succession, and valuation, it has gone through a change in 2018. And just to echo what my fellow colleague was saying, so the appointments to promote diversity of gender, social and ethnic backgrounds, cognitive and personal strengths, and all directors, especially non-executive, ought to demonstrate commitment whilst getting support from management to develop understanding of the business and industry. So going through the provision that you currently have on the screen, the board should establish a nomination committee, lead the process of appointments, and ensure plans are in place for the succession to both the board and senior management positions, and oversee the development of a diverse pipeline for succession. This was actually revised in the 2018, and with 2018 with regards to the FTSE, which is the Financial Times Stock Exchange, the top 100 companies in London, and we will see further the new changes to that. So all directors should be subject to annual re-election. The board should set out the papers accompanying the resolution to elect each director, the specific reason as to why they're doing it, the contribution, and continue to be part of the board. Important also the fact that long-term sustainability success, because we do see that directors can stay there for up to 10 years. The chair should not remain in post beyond 9 years from the date of their first appointment to the board to facilitate effective succession planning and the development of a diverse board. This period can be extended for a limited time, particularly in those cases where the chair was an existing and executive director, an appointment, and a clear explanation should be provided. This was also taken into consideration in the 2018 when the then Prime Minister Theresa May suggested that if applying the proposed provisions, a director who served on the board for 5 years could only become a chairman for 4 additional years, even though he or she is valuable and important to the company and is doing exactly what the company needs. This is in line with this, since if you do count 5 plus 4, that's 9 years, which will actually contribute to the fact that the board members not stay there for more than 10 years. Next slide, please. There's an open and advertising for external search for consultancy should generally be used to appointment of chair and executive directors. This specific point is in line with the fact that they're trying to ensure diversity and ensure that there's no biasness in selecting of these directors. There should be a formal and rigorous annual evaluation of the performance of the board, its committees, the chair and individual directors, to ensure that all this are in line with the goals, the vision and the vision of the company, and that we're ensuring that maximum performance from them. The chair should act on the results of the evaluation, recognizing the strengths and addressing any weaknesses of the board. With the SWOT analysis, you can get the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and through this, they can be able to provide further. So I'll just let you know the new features as to the 2018 provisions. We do have the nomination committee should ensure plans are in place for the succession, which was point number 2. Papers accompanying the resolution to elect each director should set out the specific reason why the contribution and continues to be. That's point number 3, which are in line as the new key features in the 2018 provisions. Changes made to the existing code's principles and provisions include the annual election of directors, which states the existing exemption for companies outside of the FTSE 350 in relation to annual election of directors has been removed, meaning that all sales of premium listed companies need to comply or explain with this provision of the code. And also the board evaluation, the existing code provision asking companies to describe how the board evaluation has been conducted has been supplemented in the updated code by a call for description of the outcomes, actions taken, how the evaluation has influenced the board composition, and the nature and the extent when an external evaluators contact with the board individual directors. Next slide. So the annual report should describe the work of the nomination committee, including 1, the process used to relations to appointments and its approach succession and succession plan, how the board evaluation has been conducted, the policy on diversity and inclusion, in which I probably think this is the question was being asked. According to this, the company should ensure that their board is diverse. Also in culture, also the fact that a company is based in a certain place or region should also encompass like employ people from that side, from that area, and also the gender balance of those in the senior management and the direct reports. I think I'll pass it over to my colleague.
Okay, hello. I'm Derek Musuya. I'll be taking you through audit risk, internal control. Can you get me?
Unajua little zimefuatana hivyo just mpaka kwa mwisho. Niko nafuatilia tu nini.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah.
Please mute your mic.
So under the audit risk and internal control, it is expected that the board establishes a formal and transparent policy that will help improve the effectiveness of the internal and external audit functions. So we all know the importance of transparency, especially in the audit section of a company. So transparency will help the company get its actual evaluation of what is happening through the internal and the external audit. So the board should also prevent a fair, balanced, and understandable assessment of the company's position. This just relates to audit. So for audits to be clear, for the audits to be effective and clear, we expect that a fair process is undertaken to get the results. So this involves skipping things like bias that will enable clear results. The board should also establish procedures to manage risk, oversee the internal control frameworks, and determine the nature and extent of principal risk. So the company must have adequate and right procedures to help them manage their risks. And this risk, if these risks are managed well, then you can achieve long-term strategic objectives. So if a company manages risks poorly, the strategic objectives might not be achieved because they get unclear audit on what's happening, and maybe it lies to them of the actual position of the company at that point. Next slide. Okay, on the next slide, it's also expected that the board establishes an audit committee of independent non-executive directors with a minimum membership of three, or in the case of smaller, 2. So these are the expectations of the numbers of the membership and director that will and make decisions privately, separately from the other members, and give their clear, their truthful evaluation of the progress of the company. I'll pass over to Kibet.
I'm going to set this one in view as well. So
I'm Tibet, and I'll be taking you through the roles of the audit committee. So the responsibilities and roles of an audit committee include to monitor integrity of financial statements of entity, to review the entity's internal control system and risk management systems, but unless there's a separate committee for that. Also, the rules include monitor and review of entities' internal audit function, and to recommend to the board in relations to the appointment of external auditors, such as approving remunerations and terms of engagements. Next slide. Also, the roles include monitoring the effectiveness of the external auditor's performance and the independence and objectivity. They also develop and implement policy on the engagement of the external auditor to supply non-audit services. Yeah, next. So to continue the provisions, the annual reports should describe the work of the audit committee, and the directors should explain in the annual report their responsibility for preparing the annual reports and accounts, and also state what they consider the annual reports and accounts taken as a whole is fair, balanced, and understandable. It should also carry out a robust assessment of the company's emerging and principal risks. And finally, the board should monitor the company's risk management and internal control systems, and at least annually, once a year, carry out a review of the effectiveness and reports on that review in the annual reports. Yeah.
My name is Brett Satuti. I'm going to take you through remuneration. So basically, remuneration is any kind of money paid for a work service, such as salaries, wages, commissions. I'm going to take you through the principles of the remuneration. Next slide. So remuneration policies and practices should be designed to support strategy and promote long-term sustainable success, meaning that these policies should encourage the core values of the company to continue growing instead of growing the company in a negative way. So executive remuneration should be aligned to company purpose and values, and clearly be linked to the successful delivery of the company's long-term strategy. Like I've said, the policies should not hurt the business or the corporation in any way. Rather, it should support its core values. The second point is that a formal and transparent procedure for developing policy on executive remuneration and determining director and senior management remuneration should be established, meaning that there should be a procedure in which the management are selected, the directors are selected, like the non-executive directors and other senior management directors. The last principle is that directors should exercise independent judgment and discretion when authorizing remuneration outcomes, taking account of company individual performance and wider circumstances, meaning that these directors who come after appointment should not be, their decisions should not be governed by a particular line of thought or a particular line of people, but rather they should take into account everything that the company is doing, basically like every employee, and they should promote the core values of the company rather than destroy them. Next slide. Yeah, so I'm going to take you through the provisions of the remunerations. First one is that the board should establish a committee and executive directors. And an executive director is a member of the board of directors who is not part of the executive team, meaning that
Who is this now?
it is Brett.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. So I was explaining the meaning of non-executive directors. I mean, he is a member. He or she is a member of a company's board of directors who is not part of the executive team, meaning that he does not take part or engage in day-to-day management. but is involved in the policies at the background. So the first provision states that the executive directors will have a minimum membership of 3, or in case of smaller companies, 2. The second point is that the committee should have delegated responsibility for determining policy for executive director remuneration and setting remuneration for the chair, directors, and senior management, meaning that there should be delegated responsibility to the executive directors on what they are going to do, short to their work plan and everything. Third point is that where a remuneration consultant is appointed, it will be the responsibility of the remuneration committee. Meaning, I think it's self-explanatory, meaning the remuneration committee should appoint remuneration consultants. Next slide. Remuneration schemes should promote long-term shareholdings by executive directors that support alignment with long-term shareholder interest, meaning that these schemes should not be formed for short-term goals. It should rather promote long-term goals by shareholders and all the stakeholders. The next point is that remuneration schemes and policies enable the use of discretion to provide the like outcomes, meaning that outcomes of particular policy should not shares awards granted for this purpose should be released for the sale on a phased basis and be subject to total vesting and holding period of 5 or more years. The remuneration committee should develop a formal policy for post-employment shareholding requirements encompassing unvested and vested shares. So the other point is that only basic salary should be pensionable. The pension contributes rates for executive directors for payments in the lieu aligned with those available in the workforce. The next point is that notice or contract period should be less than 1 year or less. And the final point is that there should be a description of work of the remuneration committee in the annual report. So next slide. Yeah, so that is the end. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. For those who presented and the ones who are in class, do you see any connection with Cadbury report or with the Sarbanes and Oxley, some other reports that have already been given, presented? Actually, we have only Cadbury, but the ones who are going to report next, can you see anything similar in with this UK combined code? Those who have done the Cadbury report and those who are going to report the next one for the US. Did you identify some things when you were listening, or you got distracted because it was very long? You don't see anything similar? Yes, James. Very good.
I think they're all just connected because they're trying to promote accountability and responsibility in the leadership of the company in general.
Mm-hmm. Like for example, remuneration, audit, they are similar. The financial reporting, they are each code should have some addition. I'm going to take you through the origins of the UK combined code shortly, but I wanted you to be able to. I don't know if you can hear me. My thing is just going around in circles here. That as you're listening, you should be able to identify some similar things, similar provisions, similar principles and perhaps a little bit more enhanced. It's because it's a development of the others. Because this particular one is 2018, so it means that it has already borrowed or developed other provisions of maybe other codes from abroad, even abroad, the US, Germany or South Africa, all other codes. Okay, because even clearly the one of financial responsibility of the directors being aware of their accountability in terms of the financial statements that could have come from the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, okay, because that was much earlier, and this is 2018. So that's the idea that they could have borrowed, and also from the Cadbury report. Okay, so we are going to have a break for about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to just take a few minutes, some minutes before Matenge's group presents their report. Okay, if you have no other question. So shall we go for the break? Okay.
Anyway, some people can help themselves permanently. I was at a girl's birthday party and she was complaining that she didn't have anybody to frick on her birthday. I happened to be standing in the right place
Okay,
at the right
so
time.
let me.
I replied to her, "Wanna go frick?" she said. "Come on, let's go." I had never met this person prior to that night. I love telling that story. 90% of success is just showing up. You're telling me I get to play a round of golf with the Morgan.
Okay, let me share my screen
I get to play golf
and
with
let me
God.
go through this
Endless
quickly so that
4.5 hours of my life.
we can
I asked
give
my
to the
fiance
next
at the time if he was
presenters
sleeping with my best
the
friend.
floor.
I think in the back of
So
my mind,
UK
I had
combined
to have
code.
known it would be a
I don't know. I
yes,
hope you
but
guys
I
are
was
there
really
now.
hoping it was a no.
Back.
I already
UK
knew that he was
combined code
cheating on
is called
one of the
so
girls.
because
Yes,
it's a
one of them had
combination.
called our house while
It's
he was out
borrowed
and was
from.
surprised her new boyfriend had a live-in girlfriend. She told me he was also seeing this other girl, and the description matched that of my best friend, but also his ex-girlfriend.
From the different
Anybody,
committees, the reports of different committees over time.
I have a wonderful husband now, and we have a great marriage with none of that balls.
What am I looking at?
I yelled to my brother to ask if he wanted pizza. He said yes. What I didn't know was that he was right behind me. Scared the crap out of me.
Blaze, what's happening?
Our parents never bought me and my brother sugary cereal or snacks as kids, chocolate Pop-Tarts, Gushers, fruit by the foot. One
Are
time
you
they
still
agreed
studying
to
for the cut?
a 3-pack
Yeah,
of
sorry,
Captain
something
Crunch.
updated
It was
by
a
control.
glorious next couple of weeks for our household.
But how are you sharing? I have not even made you a co-host.
My mates and this girl wander off
I think it's the
upstairs.
nature of the meeting.
After about half an hour or so, she walks back in. I stand
Everybody
up
can
and say
share.
my turn
Okay.
next, trying to
Very
get
well.
out. She shrugs and
Where
says
am
sure
I?
thing. I
I
sit
was
in
telling
shocked
you
silence,
about
flapping my jaw for a
yes,
good 10
okay.
seconds before
Let me
doing
see.
my best Hugh
The
Grant
different, the UK
impression.
combined code is combined because
Thanks very much,
it's
and
it
obviously
is a
you're very
combination
attractive
of
and
the
all that.
different
I'm probably not just right
reports.
now
It
if that's
draws from
okay. My mates
the
won't beat
different
themselves through us.
reports
She
from
definitely
different
won the joke.
committees in the past.
Started a new job at the end of the first week, which I felt went really well. The
So
CEO,
we have
whom I reported, called me into his office to ask me how I thought things had gone. I smiled warmly and enthusiastically and told him I thought things had gone great, that I liked being there and was looking forward to the following week. He frowned and told me that his opinion was different, and then proceeded to go down a laundry list of things I'd done wrong. Such offenses as not
So we
coming into
have
his office in the mornings to say hello,
gra-
arriving at
what do you call it?
745, 15
The
minutes prior
Cadbury
to my
report in
scheduled start,
1992.
instead
Then
of
we
half
had
an hour
well,
prior.
we had
Apparently, although
the
my
next
hours were
one,
8 to
the
5,
Greenberry
he
in
expected me there
1995,
by
and Hampbell
7:30.
report. So the
My
original
offenses
combined code
which
that was
I
published in
outwent his
1998
expectations at any point
was,
during the week.
was
I would
drawn
have
from
lied.
these three
Thus
reports,
began a
combination of
terroristic
these
reign.
three.
Nothing I
And then
did
with
was good
time,
enough. And by the end of the third
those
week, I was
others
leasing
were
fares on the
included:
daily, after having
Turnbull,
been screamed at and
Higgs,
ridiculed from minor.
Tyson,
Like a
and
crap
Smith.
day every day.
And there were different
I docked my pay for Thanksgiving
different
the day after.
editions,
I was a
different
salaried
revisions. From
I fought with
1998,
HR and
there was
got the pay and then
2003,
started job hunting.
2005,
At week 6,
2008,
I went in and said
and
basically
10,
this.
12,
So I think we
different
can
years
recommend
until
that
now
it's
we have the
working out. I'm
2018
willing to leave today with
that was just reported, represented by
since it's the
by
holiday
James
season and
Group.
it may take me a while
So
to
then
find a job. Within
it
an
was
hour, I had a
because of
check in
this,
my hand.
they were drawn from these
I had
different
4 offers
reports.
elsewhere.
Okay, so now it appears that every time they are refining it, so much so that they look now similar to other reports, that the other codes, regulations that we hear or we read. So it was combined code because it was first, when it was first published in 1998. It embodied the findings of Cadbury, Greenberry, and Hamper. Okay, so we had gone through extensively on the Cadbury report, and in fact, just with that, I think you have a very good picture of corporate governance, of good governance, what it entails. Okay, so the Greenberry one was in response to the concern of the public and the shareholders about the director's remuneration. So it dealt with the size of remuneration, director's remuneration package, and also the disclosure, the importance of the disclosure in the financial reports. Now they need to include different, well, all the transactions that they have, explanatory notes on what was happening, in order to give a full picture of the financial position of a company. So according to Sir Richard Greenberry, the theme of this report was on accountability, responsibility, full disclosure, alignment of director and shareholder interest, and improved company performance. So it was mainly dealing with, it was mainly applicable to public directors, public limited companies, but it was also addressing to some extent not the needs of smaller listed companies and even unlisted companies. Now, they were recommending to strengthen the accountability in enhancing the performance of director by establishing a remuneration committee so that they can design an objective compensation package, and also to link performance, to link the pay to performance, to rewards. I mean, rather to the actual performance of the directors. How the execution of the work can actually lead to measurable business success or business performance. That was the main thing. Greenberry was, Sir Richard Greenberry was the CEO and the chairman of the Marks and Spencer in Britain for a little over 10 years. So he had a lot of experience. And Sir Adrian Cadbury was the chairman of Cadbury and Schweppes, I don't know how to pronounce that, for 24 years. So these are people with a lot of experience. So Hampel was now updating the reports, no, the recommendations of Cadbury and Greenberry Committee. So, but basically, in the end, he was just endorsing the findings of the two committees. But at the same time, this report highlighted the
It still feels unreal.
the
I don't
role,
think
not the
I knew.
fiduciary
If you
role
were about to ask,
of the
apparently
directors
I could be
to
several other
what they
people.
owe to the
If
shareholders.
you are in a similar
That as much as the
situation, turn
directors
on
as
Twitter
board are
now.
responsible
DM
for
me.
relations
I
with
love hearing
stakeholders,
stories like this,
they
and I'd
are
be happy to help.
still
I can't tell you what I did step by
accountable to
step.
the
Maybe
shareholders.
it'll help you
They are
guys.
basically
Fucking the
emphasizing
dream man.
still the idea of protecting protecting the shareholders' interest, or what do you call it, shareholder, increasing the shareholder value. But then, okay, there is this angle, no, the nuance that says that in order to promote, shareholder value in the long term, they actually need to focus the the importance of sustaining these stakeholder relationships. So more or less aligning themselves to what they have, that is called enhanced
Rolled off at 48 hours in Mexico
shareholder, the
once. Was
stakeholder,
dancing
rather
with a smoking
stakeholder
hot American girl. Didn't have
theory.
very long in the town,
That,
so
that
I
that's
decided
what
to
we
go with
were
Eddie
talking
Murphy in
about,
48
finding a
hours.
balance
You
between
know,
stakeholder
there's a
and
hotel right across
and
the
shareholder
street.
theory.
Let's go get a room. Have
So
some
also
fun,
they
and come
emphasize
right back.
the role
Okay.
of institutional
Luckily, there was a
investors,
hotel
because
across
in
the
the
street.
beginning
I didn't know
the
if gradually was or
shareholders
not.
would
Didn't get
just
wrong.
rely
The
on what the
friend.
directors would say.
One
Normally
summer,
they
my
just,
friends and I were
okay, they
buying
call
some
it
ice
box
cream
ticking,
at
but they
Baskin
just sign, they just
There was a
approve, they
huge
trust
line of 15 plus people
the
wrapped around the
shareholders
place.
rather than
I had a
the
cute girl
directors.
serving me.
So
I
now
chatted
this
her up
sample
as I
report
ordered,
was
and when
saying
it came
we
time, she
need to
asked
be
if
more
I wanted any
proactive, to take
toppings.
real
I said,
interest
sure.
in what's
I'll have some
happening in the
granola.
organization,
Oh, isn't your
so
phone
that
number?
things don't
A
take you by
couple of girls
surprise.
behind me audibly gasped.
So it is highly desirable, they
Let's
said,
go.
that companies and institutional
Back at school, I
investors
came into class late.
engage in
The
dialogue,
teacher wasn't there and everybody was talking.
that
So I
institutional
covered the
investors
mouth
may
jokingly.
consider use
What
of their
happened?
shares,
Somebody killed
because
himself.
they have a lot of
Yes,
power,
an 11-year-old
with,
Vietnamese
I mean,
immigrant.
a lot of
What happened?
influence,
I
because
was 17
institutional
at the time. I
investors
had
normally
met
have
the girl on WoW and we talked for probably about a year.
a lot
She
of
lived in
share in the
Wisconsin while I
shareholders
was living in
in the
Florida.
capital
At some point,
structure.
she went to
They,
visit her
they,
mother in NC
they
after she
normally have
graduated.
a big
I
part,
saw
big
this as an
share in
opportunity and asked
the
her if she wanted to do her
corporation's
first
equity.
semester on college where I lived and we could
Okay, so
see where things
that's
went from
Hample.
there. Of
Then the
course, I
Turnbull,
had yet to tell my parents
the
about my plan.
Turnbull
My
was
parents had
now
always been
focusing on
incredible,
internal
but relatively
control,
strict. My dad
okay,
was from a
so that
successful
the
military
directors
background in the Air
have the
Force. I told
obligation,
them
they
I was
highlighted
trying
this,
to get a girl I
of
had
the
met in
director's
town,
obligation to
hoping she
keep
could
internal
influence why she went to
controls,
school.
good
The
internal
first thing I
controls,
expected was shock and a big
and
no.
establish
I
good
instead
audit
had a few
measures,
questions about
so
her,
that
her
they can
family,
guarantee
and
the
my
quality
plan to
of
get her,
financial
and then a big
reporting.
yes.
So this
Borrowed
was
my
from
dad's truck.
1999. Now
Drove
we are
12 hours
talking
to
of
get her. Turns out she
2018,
was
so you can see it's a
exactly like I
development.
expected.
And then
Disguised a
also
lot
what
drier. Once
the
I told
US
her that,
one
we hit it off as good as
will
could be.
say,
Now, almost 4 years later, we are married and could not be happier.
will now
When
when
I
they
was a
develop,
kid, I
because in the
jokingly
midst of
asked
all
my mom,
this,
what if
still
Greenland was
a lot
icy
of
and
fraud,
Iceland was green you can imagine? How I thought
scandals
that was
came
the
about,
greatest
as
thing
we are
ever
going to
when
be
she
told, in
told that's how
2000,
it really
2001,
was.
2002,
Not quite a
early
full-on
2000,
yes, but the most
and up
shocking thing that's happened when
to
I
the
was
end of the
just joking
decade,
around. It
2008,
was
we
my
had
friend and two girls that she
this
knew when we were driving to Safeway.
financial
I am
crisis
joking around the
again
whole
in the
time,
US.
sort of a defense system for when I end
Okay,
up.
so
So I
basically
don't
the
know, and in that
Turnbull
summer
was
out,
talking
none
of
of the girls were so
internal
I then
report,
jokingly
rather
said, "You're a
internal
fond
control.
girl. Did you ever bang one of the
So
horses?"
now
The response I got back was, "Hello,
Higgs was
that'd be
now
great, but I have had
focusing
sex
on the role
I
of
just chucked
non-executive
it off for the
director
rest of the trip.
in the corporate governance framework,
15-year-old
so
me,
that they
desperately
have a
wanting a
lot to
ferret and parents
contribute
call it
towards the board
bank refusing,
effectiveness.
jokingly
So
asked
they
Trump,
focused on
"Can we get a
the
great date
recruitment and
instead?"
selection
Now on my
of
third great
non-executive
day. Now on
directors,
my third
that
great
they
day.
should come from different backgrounds, people from different fields, different expertise, different industry experience, people with
Who is the
international background.
you come across? Sister-in-law
So
at our wedding.
they
She did
said
everything. She
factors such
just
as
steal
company
attention away
size,
from her
age,
sister, my
makeup
wife. She
of
wore
its
a dress
customer
that she had
employee base,
altered to be
extent of
both
its
low cut and
participation
short
in global
skirted.
markets,
Then when no one
in
was
its
paying
future
her attention, kept
strategies, and its current
accidentally
board
dropping
membership
all social
are
grammar
important
in her
determinants of non-executive directors' requirements. So part of the diversity is that they need, they have different skills. So that's now the focus of Higgs report, the role of non-executive directors. So that's why the later ones that you are seeing, the UK Combined Code and the other related codes and regulations around the world, they have these things because, of course, this is UK, but it becomes applicable to other countries too because they have companies that are listed in the UK, companies operating in the US listed in the UK, or companies operating in the UK listed in the US. So somehow these things become applicable to all. So Higgs report talks of diversity of background, skills, and experience, as I was saying, and that it helps a lot, in building investors' confidence, customers and shareholders and employees when you have that board diversity in terms of expertise, international exposure, experience, number of experience in terms of uh, performing the role of a CEO, different things, no? Customer experience, legal knowledge, of, and that's now the measure of diversity. I mean, some aspects of diversity. So the Tyson report of Dean Laura Tyson, think, I'm not sure now if she's from the London School or from the Harvard Business School, but she emphasized on the report of Higgs review on the role of the non-executive directors. But now they were saying, according to the report, that they should be what the providers of training um, should be aligned. No, the training that they offer should be aligned to what the companies actually need. And then the importance of optimizing board membership, that of precisely diversity, and they say that you can organizations can also make use of what they call marzipan layer. I don't know how to write, but just the way it sounds, marzipan, MARZIPAN. No? I think it's like some pastry, meaning that you can look for executives, no, for directors, not only from the top echelons of management, no, CEOs, but even to the next level, as in the second level to the top, no, so that you can bring up, other skills. I mean, other talents. They can also, I mean, you can draw a lot of benefit from making use of not just people, at the top echelons all the time. Even these people in the next layer, this marzipan layer, can actually contribute a lot. So they are saying that, you diversify, go to different industries, look for, probably we can say, look for people who are experts in technology, who are expert in finance, who are expert in legal matters. So the combination of all these different experiences or different expertise can contribute to the board effectiveness, to strengthen the board effectiveness. So Smith report was in 2003, was from Sir Robert Smith, was concerned with the independence of auditors. Okay, so then this was in the wake of the Arthur Anderson and Enron scandal that Matengi's group will tell us more now in the next few minutes. So yes, they were saying an auditor himself must check whether a company's corporate governance structure provides safeguards to preserve his own independence. Basically, the highlight is independence of directors. And then it talks about the role of the audit committee. So what you are talking about now in 2008 has come from this 2003 report by Smith and his committee. So basically, the UK Combined Code has been drawn, from this. So the Cadbury was focusing on the board of directors. Well, financial reliability of financial reports. Okay, it tells us also about this non-executive directors, institutional investors, and code of best practice. Highlighted the separation of chairman and CEO, plus all those things that we have said earlier that now cannot fit in here. So Greenberry was focused on remuneration. So there was the remuneration committee, and that performance, rather rewards, must be based
He was going to kill
in
himself. I hate that I
performance,
was young
actual
and dumb.
performance.
So it worked and we ended up back together.
Campbell was now while reinforcing these reports. Yes, consolidating in the combined report. Turnbull was now in internal control, in Higgs, the role of non-executive directors, having clear guidelines. So basically, because of this, you have now the UK Combined Code with the leadership and the goal, board leadership. Then you have the division of responsibilities. You have audit. All these have come from these earlier reports. That's why now it's called combined report. You have succession, composition of the board, and all those things, evaluation, training, and remuneration. This has come from all these different reports. Okay, so I just want to introduce this or explain this so that we understand why it is a combined code. Combined code. Now they don't make reference too much on this now because it has been updated, but they have a website where they have a history of all these reports. Now the FRC, uh, Financial Reporting Council of the UK, has this historical development of how this UK combined code. So they refine it each time. Okay, so with that, we give now the floor to Matenge, Matenge's group. Yes, hold on. I may not need to make you a co-host because I understand that you can be a co-host anyway. You see? Oh.
Okay, good afternoon. I hope you can all see the screen.
They never saw anyone enter
It's still loading.
security camera.
Yes, now we can.
A chest with a knife. Never saw any scarring
Okay,
or
so
evidence of any sort.
yes, good afternoon again. This is Group 6, and we'll be presenting the US Sarbanes-Oxley Act. And as you can see, those are our members, and we'll take you through. So I'll begin, and I'll give you guys the introduction. So the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, or as you call it, we can call it SOX, is a federal law that was passed by the U.S. Congress on July the 30th of 2002, and it was established for auditing and financial regulations for public companies. So this was to enhance company governance, responsibility, and disclosure in order to protect investors from fraudulent financial reporting by these corporations and the people who actually direct these corporations. So these sets of laws were directed mostly to the public companies themselves, as well as accounting firms. And we will see shortly how various public companies like Enron and auditing firms like Anderson actually went down because of this. And they were actually colluding in order to cheat investors through fraudulent financial reporting. And also, an addition to this was that the CEOs and the CFOs of these companies have to certify their financial statements and internal controls, because there was a case whereby the CEO and the CFO would say that I never heard about these financial reports. I never looked at them. I thought that the company was in good shape. So these are the things that the SOX Act wanted to tackle. So the history and how it actually started off was that two people came together. So Senator Paul Sabans and Congressman Representative Michael Oxley actually co-sponsored the act, and due to the major corporate scandals that, especially the Enron scandal, which actually happened earlier, the last year, which is 2001 in December. So this act actually it's meant to enforce that companies should implement internal controls in order to ensure accurate financial statements. However, due to the previous acts, many of these companies would find that these internal controls were a bit too costly and overwhelming. So basically it didn't cater to their bottom line or their profits. Basically, you have to get an auditor and you have to pay him and all these things. So many companies will do it. So the Oxley Act was enacted in order to bring in mitigating controls by the state. So basically, you have to, if the companies won't do it, it has to be enforced by the state. And that's like the whole idea about this report, in order to ensure to prevent errors and fraud in a company. So I'll invite John to take you through the Enron scandal.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about Enron. So it's a company in the US that was it was founded in Houston, Texas in 1985 between the merger of two companies, Houston Natural Gas and Internorth. And Kennedy Lay became the CEO and chairman of Enron. After the merger, Enron was rebranded into an energy trader and supplier. They made bets on future prices of natural gas and power as the market was deregulated to prevent energy monopolies. Enron executives took advantage of this deregulated market to increase profits and enrich themselves. In 1990, Jeffrey Skilling was appointed to head the Enron Finance Corporation. Skilling led the transition from traditional historical cost accounting to mark-to-market accounting, which was approved by the SEC in 1992. MTM is a measure of the fair value of the accounts that can change over time. This means it provides a realistic appraisal of a company's current financial situation. However, it is not the actual cost, but the fair or cost to be. This allowed Enron to log estimated profits as actual profits, even before receiving a return. In October 1999, Enron created Enron Online, an electronic trading website focused on commodities such as insurance, natural gas, power, and even the weather. Enron was the counterparty to every transaction of the site as either a buyer or a seller. They used their reputation, credit, and expertise in the energy sector to entice participants to trade. By mid-2000, Enron Online was executing nearly 350 billion in trades. This later collapsed during the dot-com bubble. Enron had a partnership with Blockbuster. They were trying to establish a video-on-demand streaming service like Netflix in July 2000. The Enron executives made rosy estimations on how many cities would join, as well as the market they would share. These estimations booked as $110 million in profit immediately after the deal, even before the project materialized. In reality, executing the streaming service was difficult, since content owners were wary of joining a medium they had no control over. The technology being used was also very expensive to the average consumer, and the network providers at the last mile were tough in negotiations. Eventually, the project failed. However, the estimated gains were still booked. Next slide. Enron spent billions on unprofitable previous slide. Yeah, Enron spent billions on unprofitable projects such as a power plant in India, where consumers could not afford to pay for the power. Also, building high-speed broadband telecom networks for hundreds of millions of dollars with almost no return. By fall of 2000, Enron was starting to crumble, and the CEO, Jeffrey Skilling, hid the financial losses of the online trading business and other operations using a market fund.
Yours. Bad upbringing. Hers was worse. A tragic loss. Nothing compared to what she went through. Had some incredible
The revenue was less than the projected amount. Instead of booking the loss, the company would transfer the assets to an off-the-books corporation, a special purpose vehicle, or entity, where the loss would go unreported. This allowed the company to appear more profitable than it was.
Flailing her arms into being loud and physical just so people would watch her. She'd make out with all our mutuals, whom she referred to as her sons. Gross. Just
Enron's accounting firm, Arthur Andersen LLP, was another player in the scandal. Despite Enron's poor accounting practices, the firm still approved and signed off on the corporate reports. By April 2001, many analysts and journalists started to question Enron's earnings and the company's transparency. The company eventually fell and filed for bankruptcy. The organization was reorganized and liquidated, its assets to pay back its creditors. Yeah, Shadrach shall take you through the next.
Hi everyone, I'm Shadrach. I'm going to take you through the effects of the Enron scandal. So, to start with, the first effect is the bankruptcy of the Enron Corporation, and the Enron Corporation eventually was caught by the SEC, and they did an investigation, and they found out that they had losses amounting to around $500 million and a lot of debt. They had a lot of debt, millions of dollars. So eventually, the company was forced to declare bankruptcy and end all its operations. And the second effect is the dissolution of Arthur Andersen, which was one of the largest auditing firms in the world. So this was the company who was the accountant for the Enron, and they were the one who were auditing. They were responsible for auditing. So in the investigation, they were found guilty. They were found guilty of obstruction of justice for shredding Enron's financial documents to conceal from the SEC. So because of this, they ended their role as auditors of public companies, and it ended like that. And the other effect is several Enron executives were charged with conspiracy, inside trading, and securities fraud. So there were a number of executives who were the CEO. The first one was the CEO, Kennedy Lay, who was convicted of bank fraud and conspiracy. But he died of a heart attack before even he could serve his sentence. Another guy is Andrew Fasto, the CFO, who this one pled guilty to wire fraud and security fraud, and he served 5 years in prison. And this other guy, Jeffrey Skilling, he's a former CEO. He was convicted of conspiracy, fraud, and inside trading. And he was also sentenced to a lot of years. Finally, the final effect is the Enron collapse and financial havoc on shareholders and employees led to new relegations regulations to promote accuracy of financial reporting for publicly traded companies. So because of the Enron scandal, the point of corporate governance was much more enforced right now to provide better transparency and disclosure of information. That's all about the effects. You can watch a certain video that is provided on the slides if you want to read more, to know more about the Emerald scandal. I'll hand it over to the next guy to talk about WorldCom. Thank you.
So I'll be presenting about WorldCom.
She stopped crying. I started hearing voices coming from the baby monitor once again, but this time it wasn't the baby. I listened closely and heard a woman whisper, singing a lullaby.
An American worker named George had his sights set on a comfortable retirement.
There was a static in the water, and the woman had stopped singing. Then the baby stopped crying. Each time the woman would start singing again, the baby would start crying. I was so fucking scared. When I was younger, I lived in a different house.
Perhaps some holidays in the sun, relaxing in the garden with good novels, and a gin and tonic by his side. And then, when the company he worked for, the energy giant called Enron Corporation, collapsed in front of his eyes, those plans went up in some savings, which had mostly been tied up in Enron company stock. No one ever thought such a behemoth of a company could just go belly up. It was a story that shocked the world, one involving mismanagement, corruption, and greed. This is what happened. In its heyday, Enron was one of the largest companies in the USA. At its peak, its shares reached $90.75. And when it declared bankruptcy in 2001, they were worth 26 cents. Few saw it coming, and to this day, the downfall is a reminder to all of us that indeed, giants can fall. And on top of that, giants aren't always what they seem. The story starts in 1985 when two companies merged. They were Texas-based Houston Natural Gas Company and Omaha-based InterNorth Incorporated. At the beginning, the new Enron was simply a very big natural gas supplier. But then in 1989, it turned a leaf in its book and began trading natural gas commodities. In 1994, it also began trading electricity. These changes took place under its new CEO, Kenneth Lay, who had formerly been the chair at Houston Natural Gas. But at the time of its fall, the New York Times wrote, Enron, time-shifting market-making company. It added to the end of that paragraph, it's also at this point in time a bankrupt company. As the story goes, before Enron got started, gas and electricity were produced and sold by state-regulated monopolies. But then there was deregulation, and as the Times writes, Enron used Wall Street magic to transform energy supplies into financial instruments that could be traded online like stocks and bonds. Prior to this, those energy monopolies were always under government scrutiny. But after deregulation, Enron had more freedom and also placing bets on future energy prices. Enron started selling contracts called energy derivatives to investors. Soon, Enron was called America's most innovative company. And this looked good for the consumer because with supply and demand taking over fixed prices by monopolies, the prices for customers seemed fair. It seemed like a dream story for capitalism. There was a problem, though, and something didn't quite add up. You see, Enron thought that if it could trade energy, then why not trade all kinds of other things, such as insurance or advertising, and then turn these into contracts and sell them as derivatives too. The company poured billions into these new trading ventures, but not everything turned into gold. It later turned out that while Enron was winning on some levels, it was losing on others. But the problem was it wasn't always coming clean about where it was losing. It was kind of fixing its accounts and reporting false trading revenues. As one person pointed out, some of the schemes traders used, including serving as middlemen on contract trade, linking up a buyer and a seller for a future contract, and then booking the entire sale as Enron revenue. Enron was also using its partnerships to sell contracts back and forth to itself and booking revenue each time. It was, in fact, creating imaginary revenues. If that's confusing to you, the Wall Street Journal gave an example of one such piece of Enron's subterfuge. Enron got into a deal with Blockbuster. Those guys whose stores you go into and ask them to rent out a movie, the new deal with Blockbuster was to do this online, but it didn't work out, and in 8 months, the business was a total flop. While this was going on, Enron had made a deal with a Canadian bank. If the bank loaned Enron $115 million, Enron would then hand over its video deal profits for the first 10 years to the bank. As you know, Enron made no cash from this online video renting business with Blockbuster, but it still wrote the $115 million down as part of its revenue, not a massive loss. The Canadian bank was owed money, but on paper, things didn't look bad for Enron. According to the New York Times, Enron did a fair bit of shady accounting, and still, Wall Street bankers at JP Morgan and others were gung-ho about the company and its stock. Some people, however, began to smell a rat. The thing was, Enron was also seen as a fairy tale winner in the years when deregulation and online trading, embodied by a get-rich-quick culture, were admired by everyone. Leave the innovators alone. This is the future. But things got out of hand, as they tend to do when, in Hobbesian terms, the Leviathan goes missing and no one's watching over the people to ensure nothing terrible is happening. Enron also invested heavily in high-speed broadband telecom networks, but the company saw no profits from that either. The most innovative company in America was on a losing streak, but still those losses were not reported. It was hiding all its financial losses using something called mark-to-market accounting. Investopedia explains that like this. This technique measures the value of a security based on its current market value instead of its book value. This can work well when trading securities, but it can be disastrous for actual businesses. Another example given of the Enron way of hiding its losses is this. If the company bought a power plant, it would first put the projected profit on its books. That's a projected profit, meaning nothing has actually been made. If then Enron actually did make a profit but a loss, it would transfer the loss to an off-the-books corporation somewhere no one would find it. This way, Enron's bottom line didn't look affected, and everyone still thought the company was booming, when in fact heavy losses were being incurred, and then hidden like soiled underwear at the bottom of a laundry basket. Enron used something called off-balance sheet special purpose vehicles, or SPVs, to hide these failures. But all you need to know is that this is a technique that can be used to fool investors and creditors. The experts tell us this is not illegal, but it can be dangerous. At the same time, not everyone understands how they work, so it could be said to be slightly unethical if companies are not completely transparent about it. And then the bubble burst, as bubbles tend to do. By April 2001, analysts were on to Enron. They saw what was happening, realizing that accounting wizardry had been creating a company not unlike the fantasy city of Oz. Behind the screens, Enron was crumbling, and by summer 2001, the company was in free fall. Its stock was downgraded, sinking like a stone into the abyss. By 2000, it was revealed that Enron had losses of $591 million and $628 million in debt. In 2001, the company filed for bankruptcy, and a lot of poor folks whose pensions were tied up in company stock were going to have to cancel their dream vacation in the Caribbean. From 2004 to 2011, the company paid $21.7 billion to its creditors. It said shareholders lost in total around $74 billion, and employees lost billions in pension payments, with one such person being the guy we mentioned at the beginning of the story. There were many, many more like him. Some of the executives were charged with conspiracy, insider trading, and securities fraud. The CEO we mentioned died of a heart attack before he faced prison time. Others did time for facilitating corrupt business practices. Another CEO, Jeffrey Skilling, was only just released from prison. Do you think government regulation of markets is good or bad after watching this video?
Okay, so Bilal, you can take it away.
Go to the next slide. So I'll be presenting about WorldCom. So WorldCom was a company that provided
This is who now?
Dennis Mbiraro.
Okay. Okay.
WorldCom was a telecommunication company, which basically they provided phone services, that is landlines and mobile phones. So the business was great from the year 1994 to 1999, and revenues were soaring and people loved the company. So things took a turn in 1999 when there was a decline in business due to rising competition and under pressure to provide better annual statements. So during the first quarter of the year 1999, there was a meeting between the CFO, Scott Sullivan, and the controller, David Myers, to discuss the financial situation for the first quarter. So the CFO was not happy with the financial credentials. So he came up with the idea of making a bogus entry, which are just all entries which look real but are false. And this was because their margins were low. So as we know, profit margins, they gauge the degree to which a company or a business activity makes money by dividing income and revenues. So please go to the next slide.
What's the movie called? Oh, the movie. I think KSI made a movie, which I honestly have not watched or even heard anything about.
So here we see they did the same bogus entry for the first quarter and the third quarter. So in the third quarter, they saw that the bogus entry was not enough to increase their margins. And so the CFO suggested that they take the expense and turn it into an asset. So, and we know an asset is basically an expenditure that will create a future economic benefit. So in this case, there was no future economic benefit. In the third quarter, they did two mistakes, which is book another bogus entry and expense misclassification. So we see that the CFO, he fraudulently took billions of dollars in operating expenses and spread them out across the so-called property accounts. And this allowed Wacom to show the expenses in smaller amounts over a span of years instead of reporting them immediately to investors. So as a result, in 2001, the company inflated revenue by roughly $3 billion and reported $1.4 billion profit instead of a loss. So we see the fraud was uncovered in June 2002. The company's internal audit unit, led by Vice President Cynthia Cooper, discovered over $3.8 billion of fraudulent balance sheet entries. So we see at the time it was the largest accounting fraud in American history. And Wacom was forced to admit that it had overstated its assets by over $11 billion. And so later we see the CEO, Bernie Ebbers, was convicted in 2005, sentenced to 25 years in jail. He later died in February 2020 at the age of 78, right after his early decease. So you see the CFO, Scott Sullivan, being jailed for 5 years, the controller, David Myers, for 1 year. So I'll give the chance to the next presenter, Presenter Mtaiko. Thank you.
Oh, he's jumping over it, right? Oh, they killed me. What?
Okay, so I'm supposed to present this part for Taiko. My name is Ayan Kenan. And yeah, so Taiko was actually founded in 1960 by Arthur, who started the company as a research and development company that provided the services to the U.S. military. So they used to sell their research on the conductivity to the U.S. military. Later on, they started making their own product, and they started with security systems and protective equipment in general. So Taiko grew rapidly from 1970 to 1980, and in that period, they also acquired smaller companies. They also acquired 16 to 18 smaller companies during the time. Next slide. before we actually get to the part where he